I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the postseason / off-season / preseason basketball podcast. I'm Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is still on vacation. The endless vacation.
Are there enough frozen drinks for Jordan out there in the universe?
He's having all the frozen drinks.
Every one of them.
I've heard it's impossible to get a Mai Tai or a Pina Colada anywhere. There's a drought because his vacation has absorbed them all.
Are we sure that he's on a beach drinking frozen drinks and it's not 2 hot dogs in front of his camera and he's really in some basement in Greenpoint drinking White Claws? Just like avoiding hoops altogether. Just like pounding mango White Claws.
Is he on that White Claw lifestyle?
Jordo, we have to intervene. Too many White Claws. Pineapple.
Too many of those Mike's Hards.
It's too many tropical notes.
Would it be Mike's Hards lemonades? I don't know how the plurality of Mike's Hards works if you're going to shorten it without the lemonade. Because are there other Mike's Hards?
I don't know, but do you think like the stigma behind Mike's Hards? Do you think the stigma behind Hards and like Zima is kind of like an antiquated macho thing? It's like, I won't be caught drinking a Zima. And now people are just like, oh, hard seltzer, I'm down.
Yeah, it's interesting. The old fraught debates between metrosexuals and the real men of the Details magazine era. No problem these days.
No problem. It is like the metrosexual thing actually produced like more tolerance in the end, right?
I mean, you groom? You're not a man. And then we went through the whole, North Williamsburg, North Brooklyn lumberjack phase where everyone grew a beard. Now we're at this neutral buoyancy where it's like, shave your pubes, grow a huge beard. You're good to go. Have a Mike's Hards.
It's hair fluidity.
We've arrived. But yeah, the White Claw thing is, it's definitely a summer movement that feels spawned a bit by like rosé, etc. Did you see? I want to say it's. Oh wait, I could be wrong. Who's putting out the hard coffee? Oh, I think it's a PBR. They're putting out a hard coffee,
which makes total sense. What beverages haven't been alcoholized? Like there was a smoothie bar in the Lower East Side on Christie Street for a while that was offering like a spike, for like $5. And they were hoping to be like a nightlife spot. But how many spiked smoothies can you drink in one sitting with your homies? 2.
Just get together with the fellas for some chocolatinis. Go off. But it's weird that a place like Dunkin' Donuts didn't do this first, or have they? Like the hard culotta.
It's like a licensing thing, right? Like I don't know like the legal part of it, but it just reeks of something that like if you're already selling alcohol, you can add like whatever to it, but you can't add alcohol to something else.
I agree with this theory. It's also that PBR's name brand is so trash that doing something that one would assume would have to taste reasonably good, they almost should have just produced it themselves and come out with a different name. Because you're like, oh, the Pabst Blue Ribbon coffee, like, that's the shits.
It comes in a can, right? Like a tall boy can, like a beer can.
Could you envision a product that is more with the shits? Like, oh yeah, it's PBR, but it's coffee, but it's alcohol, and it's in a can. You're like, no, I don't want to do that to myself. That's like Joel Embiid round 2 level of the shits.
More shits.
Shits too.
Has anyone tried to spike CBD drinks? That's too much, right? Oh, that happens?
I feel like
alcoholic CBD drinks?
Oh, I'm sure, but I'm pretty sure even like Pepsi or Coca-Cola has like a CBD, like Gatorade CBD. I think anyone puts it in there. I've tried it before. I don't really know what it's supposed to do or what the alleged benefits are. Like, it seems okay. It certainly doesn't get you high. It's not THC.
One thing we didn't quite figure out that I'm still obsessed with on cookies is like how placebo affects hoops. But like I believe in placebo, right? Like if I was into CBD, I'd spend an extra $2 on a drink. Makes you happy, man. It's like,
did we ever get to the bottom of your nonsensical basketball placebo idea? I liked that we were working on it, but I never felt like it got to the place where we needed to be.
it ate its own tail too quickly because placebos work. So if the Knicks, like if R.J. Barrett, the biggest boomer of all time, is a placebo for the Knicks, it is also something that can work. So it kind of jumped the shark a little bit quick. I still enjoy it though. The idea of something like that a team does, acquires a player, does a trade, tells you they want it more, and having it either come true or not come true. It's just like it doesn't exist. But then it goes quickly into the nothing matters territory.
Yeah, we're going down a slippery slope in which we attempt again to figure out what the placebo effect is. My theory is still that veteran leadership is a placebo. You get veterans with the idea that they will lead your younger players and teach them how to be better pros, but in reality, it's just making you a better team.
Taj Gibson, baby.
Right. But then again, if they make you a better team, then it's not a placebo. Anyway, let's not
do this.
Let's not do this shit.
No.
I'm done with it.
Yeah. Although the interesting,
God,
no, this is more about drinks.
Oh, okay, great.
And the placebo effect. But I swear, I'll be like, I could just drink seltzer at a bar and like be around people drinking alcohol, and I'll feel like kind of vibey. And I wonder, like, so I don't drink at home at all. I haven't drank at home for like 10 years. I don't like to have alcohol around in the fridge. It's just like, it's annoying. After I have one drink, I kind of want to like call somebody and go out and like talk hoops or movies or whatever. I don't want to sit in front of my TV and get a buzz on. Like, that's not fun for me. Or listen to music like a boomer. But like, I think, I just love the way those records sound. They're so warm.
Oh, look at my new stereo system. It's Dolby.
The thing is,
let's drink some whiskeys.
The mid-range of sound.
It's a lost art.
Yeah. But I haven't been able to try White Claw or any of these spiked drinks because I don't drink at home and they don't serve them in bars. So I heard they're hard to get. So I went to find them. Anytime something's hard to get, I go right out. Like, people are waiting in line for this donut croissant thing. I'm like, well, I don't know what that is, but I'll wait online.
You're like, I'll wait in line for this. I'm desperately trying to get a Billy Ripken fuckface card. Let me get a White Claw.
You know, I like every month I search for that card, seeing if I can get like all of them for cheap. Like, that is one of the most memorable like objects of my Gen X life, and I want to own them, but they're still really expensive.
It was interesting that it became a phenomenon, the era card, and then it was clearly propagated by card companies that put errors everywhere.
Amazing.
What a weird thing, though. Just the basketball card rise and fall.
I just saw a documentary about it on Netflix that ended up being annoying. It ended up being a father-son story.
God.
It very annoying. I just wanted to know about like the market. But half of it is about like his dad, just quickly, Cliff's Notes. His dad owned a card shop that made a ton of money and left the family. So he found all these cards at his mom's house and he's like, I'm rich. But I think he was playing that up a little bit. And the story kind of centers around the Ken Griffey Jr. No Sin Bin Upper Deck card.
I have that autographed.
Oh, that's amazing. Official? Is it authenticated though? Did you just take a Sharpie to it as a young Ben Detrick trying to scam
No, I went
card
and
shop?
paid like $40 to have Ken Griffey Jr. autograph it. I saw him autograph it.
So that card is like this beautiful looking card, and it was at some point worth like $200 out of the pack in its heyday in 1989, I believe. And Upper Deck was just printing millions of them. So there's rumors that it's just like the most overproduced card. They were just making sheets of Ken Griffey Jr. cards, which is kind of illegal. Like, how do you regulate that?
What's the ethical?
Yeah.
approach to baseball cards. Should every player be represented equally, or do you want people to open packs and get a star, or do you want the stars to be less frequent?
And-
I don't actually know what the math is.
And they interviewed Topps in this documentary, and Topps is like, now we destroy cards, so we keep them limited. We know that like we undercut our own value.
Now, where does Donruss come into this?
They're gone. So
And Fleer?
by the time the Griffey card came out, all the companies that were producing cards are now all out of business except Topps. So none of them exist. Fleer, Donruss, Bowen, I think was like a Topps subcategory.
NBA cards was interesting because there was the one brand that I felt like was put out by the NBA.
Skybox?
No,
Hoops?
Hoops, I think.
Yeah, they were bad, but that Derek Coleman rookie was nice. Oh, that David Robinson
The
rookie?
Hoops ones were interesting because they put out so many of them that a pack of Hoops today sells for the same price that it
Yeah.
sold back then. It's like 50 cents a pack.
They're junk bonds, right? And I'm not even 100% sure how junk bonds worked, but it was the premise of value when something was like essentially valueless. It was a scam. But it I don't know. It's the friends we made along the way. Like, I look at those cards and they bring me
friends
joy.
we made at the card shop.
I used to be obsessed with that stuff. I used to go to the county center where the Westchester Knicks play now and the New York Liberty, and they used to have huge mega card shows, and I was just like so psyched.
Well, in some ways, placebo would not be the term here.
Oh, Jesus.
But I think the internet has supplanted that in a way that makes total sense. And we look at it as this odd phenomenon of baseball cards. And yes, it was tied into this trend and that people assumed there was money and that created this frenzy where it was like we were into sports and somehow it was also an investment plan to enrich yourself.
Well, how do you involve yourself in the thing you love, right?
Exactly. And this might sound really bizarre to people who are younger and grew up without any interest in cards or anyone ever
Zoomers.
talking about it. It was, like in our neighborhood, we traded cards. We would go get our binders. We'd sit around in a circle and you'd just sit and you'd trade cards. You'd do it for hours and hours. There'd be trades that would be going down over the course of like a month and a half. Ones that were just 6 months. I'm still trying to get that card from you. And they'd be like, what's in the offer right now? And you'd have like 20 cards just building towards someone's like Louis Aparicio.
Louis? You want a big Lou? No, but like...
I want that Winfield Rook. Two Kevin Mosses.
Well, it's funny that like right before the glut of that era, all those cards, like a Winfield rookie's worth so much now because it was before people found out they were valuable and they didn't treat them well. But I think like comic books...
But they're actually not, though. That's what's fucked up. When I was back upstate and I was looking at this card shop and we go by there and they have all these little trinkets and stuff. These old cards that we assumed were valuable, like, don't cost anything.
Well, there was another...
Like a Winfield rookie might be like $60.
Well,
it's
there's
not like 300. It's like 60.
There was another degree of security that happened like maybe 20 years ago, which was like the grading system, right? So I think if you went online and found like a mint Griffey that was authenticated, like I forget what company that does it, they put it in a case for you and they give you a number, like a Pitchfork number review. I bet you that thing is like $1,000.
Maybe, because it also falls under the category of theoretical values that someone has to also pay you that. So you can say, this is what it's worth. I'm like, cool, I'm not giving you that. And no one on the planet will give you $1,000 for a Griffey card. And you're like, still it's worth that, right? Yeah. And like, no, I'll give you $50 for it though. And you're like, so it's really worth $50? I'm like, yes.
This is what really saved me in my adulthood. Like the lessons I learned trading baseball cards and comic books. It's in the 90s. It's because like the art market kind of behaves in similar ways. And just going through that experience where I basically 3 years ago threw away in my entire collection except for one binder of cards. And right, it's like one of my friends just bought a pair of like limited edition shoes for like $200. And he goes up to me and he's like, yo, they've been reselling tonight at $750. And I'm like, for sale? From whom? And who bought it? And he was just like, oh, I just saw someone put it up for $750. I'm like, yeah, you got shooters shoot. That's a Kobe Bryant of like shoe collectors, right?
Wait, go back to the art market thing. Like, you understand how that realm works far more than me or 99% of our listeners. How does that
Readably.
How's that simple? How's that similar to baseball cards?
Well, it's like, not to get in the weeds, but a lot of
Get in the weeds.
that's
Roll
what
around
we
in
do.
it.
We don't get in the weeds and cookies.
Flick off the ticks. And get in there.
Flick that tick. It's about as simple principles as supply and demand, but it's also about who declares value on that supply. And, like a Beckett's card guide kind of tells you, like, they always reiterated it at the time, being like, it's not going up, it had gone up from last issue. So the arrow pointing up means it's a higher price than the last issue. It's not currently going up. It could go down or stay the same. It probably is going to go down. But someone declares that something's valuable, and then we all go seek out, like, the rookie card, like the Eric Lindros card. It's like, we need that score box set because there's limited cards in there you can't get in packs. And someone told us those were valuable, but someone didn't tell us there were zillions of them. And the art market kind of behaves in the same way. I think it's antithetical to how artists behave in an old-fashioned boomer way, which is like, you go to your studio or wherever you think, and you evolve and you produce as much as you want, and you to get to that point, and then they're the dealer kind of is the Beckett's card guide or the collector, and they might be like, cool, you've made 200 paintings, I'm only going to show like the public 10 of them, or the collectors 10 of them. And then, like, famously, there's artists like Gerhard Richter who destroyed his own work because he's like, oh, I got to a point I love, now I'm going to destroy everything that came before. But he could have just flipped that. I say that is a boomer thing because I think now people just, like, produce and don't care about their legacy as much. And it's a watered-down market.
Do you care about your legacy?
I don't. I used to. I stopped caring, like, in my 30s. Like, when you get older, it's like you realize that the world is not your oyster, and you just, like, you're happy you're in it. So, like, I'm just really happy making paintings in my studio. But I do think about, like, storage and volume and all these practical things. And it behaves a lot like stock market, like IPOs and all that stuff.
Mildly tying back to our conversation about the value of second-round picks from last episode, and how first-round picks
that
also
hot argument, that heated discussion.
Oh man, still hot under the collar for that one. Never really cooled off. But and first-round picks, etc. What's interesting about those is that you have a finite amount. There's 60 draft picks. There's 30 in the first and 30 in the second. But the pool that you get to choose from differs on a yearly basis, and the position which they pick differs. So just from the theoretical element, okay, you have a future first-round pick, and then it's like, well, what team is that from? Okay, it's a bad team now, but it's 7 years from now. Okay, but it's a bad team now and it's next time. And then you get the lottery, and then you get, like, it's interesting how you can trade for a first-round pick, and it could be the 30th pick, or if it's not protected, the first, which is very different from what you're describing, but it's also not that different from the stock market, right? And that, like, it's a commodity. Mm-hmm. You don't know what it'll be worth later. You can speculate. You can say, this team is bad, they are run poorly, and I assume that this pick will be worth a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy that.
I guess I'm saying that the art world, you could do the same, right? You can say this artist is on the right trajectory. If I purchase their stuff, down the line, it'll be worth more.
Theoretically, there's been some, and this ties into basketball almost directly. It's like there's some websites that try to predict, like, Sotheby's trends or Phillips trends to see what artworks will be valuable, and just through metrics, being like, how big is it? What color? What percentage of color is it? Is it figurative? Is it abstract? What dates? Who the artist is, a minority, American, female, from the South, from New York. Like, all this data gets churned into it and being like, here's the artist to collect, here's the artist to hold, here's the artist to sell. And it just didn't work. Because, like, 5 people dictate the value of these these artists, which is fine. That's how the entire world works, right?
Did they ever try to figure out dating with math? But I mean, it's funny because that does sound like a draft board, right? Where you're like looking at, you're like, okay, wingspan, height, college stats, steal ratio, block shots. You know, okay, this person, if you look at their college stats and who they are, they project to be similar to this guy from 7 years ago who ended up becoming an all-star.
I think the most interesting thing to me in the immediate memory is like what happened to Brandon Clark in this draft, and a player that is kind of similar to him in Wendell Carter Jr. went so much higher last year in the draft. Kind of these boring, really efficient, smart IQ defensive guys who doesn't hurt you anywhere and could start shooting threes if you still believe in threes. And Brandon Clark I had so high, and he was really debated on like pre-draft boards. A lot of people were just like, he's too old. He's old, like he should have been better earlier. I thought he was a top 5 pick, and he dropped all the way to 22 after the Sixers. And that's all framing because in my mind, I was watching Gonzaga. I'm like, he's better than Rui. Like, this guy's the dude on the team. But Rui has like upside of a superstar.
And Clark ended up being Summer League MVP.
Which doesn't mean that much because Knox was Summer League MVP last year. So this affects this is like part of our discussion with the art world too. Like all these weird signifiers don't kind of add up to much because Knox might be the painting that you love. I love Knox, but isn't worth as much as it was a year ago. The crazy thing that I think about quite a bit isn't like value through like being a baseball card collector or being a fan of basketball. It's like not value, it's frequency. Like I only can produce like 10 paintings a year if I'm working really hard. My paintings take forever. And I've done the math. If like I live to like hopefully 80 and I'm healthy, like that's not that many paintings. And that makes me sad a little bit in my studio. And I'm hung up on that sometimes.
Why don't you take some of our interns, lure them over there with Les Gruel?
I don't believe where I believe in interns on Twitter for cookies. I don't believe in interns in the studio.
I remember years ago doing a story on Kehinde Wiley and going to his studio. And again, this was a long time ago. He was not this figure who had painted Obama and was the biggest painter on the planet. Mm-hmm. Like I could be wrong, but I feel like he generates more money off paintings than anyone right now. Or
one of them, yeah, sure.
One of those upper echelon. But he had a studio. I think it was in Manhattan. It was a long time ago. I want to say 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I remember going in there and sort of being stunned because I'm naive about it, that he had 8 workers and they were there painting his shit. Yeah. And I hope this isn't like exposing him. But I think this is well known, right?
Yeah, I don't think he's one of the artists.
He was there. He was surveying it, but
which is probably rare.
He was Quincy Jonesing it up.
Yeah, for sure. No, I believe in that. Like, I just don't do it because maybe I want to blame boomers for this, but like, I really love artworks. Like, there's an artwork by this woman named Jay DeFeo who did like a flower like carved into like stone, and it took her forever. And it has this. I like it because like her hand is in it, and you can feel that. I don't know. That's a boomer take, but I have no problems with Jeff Koons hiring like legions of assistants to paint his stuff. Like, I think it's a boring discussion because I hope we had squashed that with Warhol already, and his works kind of like came back in a strong way that we're not really talking about. Like, it's sort of like when someone is mad at nerds for rooting for GM and not the players.
Well, that's an excellent segue, and one would consider an alley-oop of sorts. Because one conversation that a few people have had in the dregs of the offseason here, there's not much to talk about. The free agency frenzy subsided. Just a little foam left on the surface. We're past Summer League. We have training camp to look forward to. There's not shit happening in the NBA. So one of the discussions that I believe was on Bill Simmons' podcast was that why did the NBA get involved when Sam Hinkie was in the throes of the process and the team was struggling and packing in losses every season?
And also the Chris Paul trade. He didn't mention that, but like they vetoed that. they stepped in.
But why haven't they gotten involved with other franchises that have seemingly found it incredibly difficult to transform from a franchise in shambles to a respectable one in the NBA? Why haven't the relegated franchises, the Sixers were relegated, why haven't the Knicks and the Lakers been disciplined, been
Intervened upon?
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because of this weird notion of intent. Like, I think the NBA misread what Hinkie was doing as like a bad intentions, compromising what we think, whatever parity is. I don't believe in parity, but whatever that is, they felt like he was compromising the product of the NBA for a fan. And whereas the Knicks and Lakers are trying really hard up until last year, where the Knicks clearly tanked and weren't even in the NBA. But I think their intent was to get better. Therefore, you cannot justifiably intervene on their plan.
That's probably true. With Philadelphia, there wasn't any indication that they were trying to win. And it's more optics than anything else, because no one thought the Knicks were really trying to win. But this offseason, they go out and they spend money, and they bring in vets. And that makes veterans happy. That makes the players happy. That makes their agents happy. There are a lot more people who are satisfied when a team goes out there and dutifully spends its money. There are a lot more people who are disenchanted when someone like Sam Hinkie not only makes it clear that winning is not on the agenda, but says, I'm just going to eat other contracts that already exist. And look, the same amount of money is getting spent. He eats a contract from another team and someone else spends it, but that's also helping people get under the luxury tax. So there are less dollars being spent overall, which means that there's less money going to agents and to players. So he made a few groups irritated via that policy. So I think it was mostly optics. But at the same time, if the Sixers ownership was Dolan or the Buss family, they would have been like, yo, fuck out of here, Silver.
Yeah.
Like, we're the league.
Right.
We're the Lakers and we're the Knicks. We're going to do what we want and we'll figure this out. And like, don't you dare come stomping in here and try to tell us how to run our business. But the Sixers had a bunch of hedge funders who had no experience in running a basketball team. And it was also a group of, 10, 13 guys. And there's different varying measures of power within that subset. But there's a bunch of personalities, a lot of inexperience. And when Adam Silver comes and leans on you, you're far likelier to fold than if you're Mark Cuban.
And they're also mad at Hinkie, too. Since there's so many voices, like, I'm sure at least half of them are just like, what are we doing here?
Right.
Someone step in. And, like, let's not forget that Dolan and the Busses are the NBA. Like, Silver works for them.
Exactly. And in the Sixers way, Josh Harris doesn't have that same clout to say, Silver.
Yeah.
Like, you work for me. Yeah. Get in line.
Yeah. And it's a really, like, simple phenomenon that we see all the time. Like, let's say you're at an ice cream shop with your friends and, like, 5 people get like sundaes, and one person's like, I gotta work out tomorrow, no cheating today for me. And they're like, you're a cop. And it's like this peer pressure thing, being like, you're doing something different, how dare you, in the moment. And I think that's what Hinkie was doing, where everyone understood his plan, but they were like, oh, but we're having Sundays, you're gonna have one too. It's like shots at a bar, like you're not having a shot with us.
And it's also the relative inexperience of everyone involved, is that Sam Hinkie was like 35 years old when this happened, and it was his first job outside of Houston. He was obviously respected in the industry, but it would be different if he was someone from the old guard and he had rebuilt 2 teams before and was part of that NBA good old boy network. He wasn't. He was someone who was reviled for being the opposite, for being a dork and for being a non-athlete. Mm-hmm. In terms of
It's didn't optics. Come out of he was balding. He just looked like a pencil pusher.
100%. And I think those all played into it. But the thing about the Knicks and the Lakers is, I used to think, and I still agree, I guess to an extent, that the NBA would be better if the Lakers were good and the Knicks were good because
100.
you want that kind of attention in big
Yeah.
markets. And I want to watch Knicks games and be excited by the Knicks, even if I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool Knicks fan. I want the Lakers to be on TV.
Look at you caring about wins.
But it's not even winning. It's more just
I
like
know.
it's like relevance.
Yeah.
At the same time, now I'm sort of along the lines of like, man, the Lakers being inept is charming. The Knicks being doofuses is kind of charming. Like let them live their lives.
And this has everything to do with the conversation with like I can only make certain things with the rest of my life. It's just like, oh man, if I'm lucky and I live to 80, I only have a few more off seasons to enjoy this team. And if I get angry now, like what am I doing? Like, am I just gonna live in anger for the rest of my life? I'm like, I love this team. RJ Barrett's hilarious. Let's go, you know?
That's a great point because as someone who likes the Sixers, it was very easy to be angry because generally speaking, being a Sixers fan has been deeply unrewarding outside of the athletes themselves, like the Barkley and Iverson, the guys that you like. It was a parade of ineptitude. And that's what the Knicks have. And after you're accustomed to that and you know that this is how it's going to work, you don't get angry.
Really fun.
When they bungle something like trading Porzingis, whatever people thought about it, there were people who were mad, but it's like, oh, it's the Knicks, though.
Yeah.
Like, this is what happens if you're a Knicks fan. They make poor decisions and they will fuck it up. But with the Sixers, there was this incredible sense under Hinkie that they were doing things smartly. It was almost like when a president you like is in office, you sleep better at night.
Yeah.
You'd see the Sixers trade like Michael Carter Williams, and you're like, I don't really agree with that, but he knows what he's doing. When they took Okafor, I did not like it, and he ended up being wrong. But you're still like, I can convince myself that he knows the
Framing,
plan here.
right? You're applying value to an otherwise valueless thing, which turns out to be Okafor. But you're like, oh, the framing is there.
You know what? Give this guy the benefit of the doubt. And that was the most devastating part about Hinkie being fired, was that being a fan of a team that you gave the benefit of the doubt, man, that ruled.
Yeah, and I'm jealous of that. And it's a much different thing being a fan of the Sixers than the Knicks, because I would be really passionate and upset about the Knicks if I had Embiid and Simmons. I'd be like, oh my God, okay, it's happening.
Just sort this shit out, man.
Yeah, you have a championship right there.
It's there. It's there. Just figure out a few things. Like the Knicks in particular, because the Lakers now have LeBron and Anthony Davis, and the Sixers have two young superstars who are under contract together for like the next 4 years or whatever it will be. But the Knicks have nothing. They have the pairing of a Morrii and...
Which one? I can't. Oh, I'll never know.
No one knows.
No one knows.
The Morrii don't even know which one's on the Knicks.
I'm not even sure how many Morrii there are.
What if there's a third Morrii?
The third Morrii? It's like...
Zach Morrii. Mercury Morrii.
There's a third Morrii joke in there.
My third Morrii is blind? Keep your third Morrii open?
Yeah. That's what we do here on Cookies.
Yeah, that's what we're up to. But the Knicks don't have anything, so you can't be even mad. You're like, well, you guys are going to screw this up and we'll be back where we started, but we're already at the bottom.
And I don't believe in history. The Nets have never landed huge free agents. Well, they got Vince Carter and Jason Kidd, but we weren't expecting them to get Kyrie and KD. So history kind of does and doesn't matter. Dolan and Mills behave in a way that is predictive, but if those two guys decided to come here, it just throws that all out of whack. And all we need is someone who's born in New York to want to come here. Clearly it wasn't Kemba Walker, but in the way that Gilbert got LeBron and New Orleans got AD and then Zion. It's just random, and we haven't had that luck yet. But
what's interesting about the Knicks is that they're not they're as low as you can get, right? They're absolutely
they're out
lowest.
of the league.
They're relegated. They have no talent. Those guys could be talented, but they have no talent that we know of. There's no proven NBA talent on that team. As great as Mitchell Robinson is, they have no proven
He might have a rough season too.
I think he's awesome.
He's amazing.
But from a standpoint of looking at the bowels of the league and be like, you have no stars, you have no good players, but you do have your draft picks, and you do have
flexibility,
and you have some financial flexibility. So like, it's okay. You know, you didn't put yourself in a position where you mortgaged the future of the franchise and the young guys for a star. And are the Knicks prone to do that at some point? Sure, because people can't stomach this for that long.
And they're reactive, and they're not self-aware. Two things that are pretty bad. Like, I think all smart teams are not reactive and are self-aware. They know what kind of players they have. So
the Knicks are not in that bad shape. They're in the position of a shitty young team right now. The fear, though, is that they don't have the stomach for it.
Westbrook looms, man. I'm scared.
Because the Knicks are going to be the worst team in basketball again this year, or at least among them.
Yeah. We'll be flattened odds. I love it. I say Westbrook looms because I was thinking today on the way over, it's like, Morrii knows what he's doing. He's one of those guys where I'm just like, well, that's a tough contract, but it's Morrii, so he knows what he's doing. I would almost say that in the back of his mind, he's like, I'm going to let Westbrook ball out for maybe most of the season and see if I can flip him. Because as we're learning, these John Wall, Chris Paul contracts, Westbrook's up there, are immovable. And he somehow moved Chris Paul and got another one. But Westbrook has an appeal that the Knicks might look at and be like, he's a star.
We've talked about OKC and Westbrook and his fit with Harden quite a bit, so I don't really want to get into that. But I saw a good thread on Twitter, and I would absolutely give credit to the person who put it up, but I forgot their...
Good job on that.
I know.
I'm not going to get into it. Let me get into it. No credit.
I'm just saying it's not someone I follow. I saw it, and it was retweeted, and it was cool. And he kind of broke down what Westbrook brings to the table and why someone like Daryl Morey would really like him. And it was all about how much he gets to the rim.
For sure.
And that was it. It was that he is elite at finishing, and he is elite at getting there. And it's totally different from Chris Paul.
And like
in that regard, Chris Paul is fantastic in many ways, but getting to the rim is not necessarily his forte.
And we had one of my favorite ways to use Twitter. We had this little back and forth with some nerds on Twitter about gravity, which was super fun. And some guy, I don't know if we can look him up to credit him, but he created an algorithm to show us visually each player's gravity in the NBA. And he's going to debut that soon. But it was like a beautiful way to talk about maybe the thing we've been suggesting for months, which is like, does gravity at the arc matter versus gravity at the rim? And how do we compare players like Ben Simmons and Russell Westbrook? And people are just complaining about like their lack of gravity at the rim and how they should create more attention there. But he created a way to visualize it where like their attention they draw at the basket is as valuable as anywhere else on the court, and it opens up shots for everyone else. You just have to surround Ben Simmons with not Boban Marjanovic.
Yeah, it was interesting because Westbrook and Simmons have incredible gravity, but in specific places. So Ben Simmons, I believe, was 9th in the entire NBA in gravity, but around the basket, which is totally runs counter to the criticism that, oh, well, you can leave him alone. You can't. He is paid more attention to around the basket than anyone in the league almost. Yeah. So the idea that like, oh, he gets his guy just leaves, and it's like, well, no, you just have to put him around the basket.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it because but it proved that Ben Simmons does have a weakness, and we've never said like he's the perfect player. He's not in the MVP discussion. He's 22 and an all-star and awesome.
To give credit for the discussion of gravity, that was Andrew Patton, who is ANPATT, and Pat7 on Twitter. And he writes for Nylon Calculus and like the B-Ball Indexed and some other stuff. He's a data dude. But it was cool visualization of how gravity works. The chart was a little tricky for me to understand, but I'm also an idiot, so...
You just have to ask an Asian. Ask an Asian, man, with glasses. I'm sitting right here.
How'd it work?
It was amazing. He modeled it in 3 dimensions. So like the cube kind of like rotated, and the farther lower he divided it up into 3 categories, like left, right, and middle. And the farther lower the graph went, the more gravity there was at that spot. And if you go really low, you're a high gravity player, which is interesting. But my question to you is like, if you step back, I'm wondering if gravity matters at all. Of course it does.
Okay, go off.
Of course it does. But how many points does it produce? So if you have like
0.
I mean, but it influences points
Yes.
per possession.
It's incredible because it's both theoretical and physical.
Yes.
It's theory that people fear that a certain player can shoot somewhere so that they move physically.
So it changes. And it's sort of,
It's also a placebo.
yeah, which is something that works.
Is it a placebo?
But it's like the weird butterfly effect, no sin bin in baseball. But I love this when like someone gets picked off of a base and then the next player hits a home run. They're like, that could have been a 2-run home run. I'm like, no, the pitcher behaves differently when there's no one on base versus someone on base. And that's kind of what gravity in basketball is. It's like how all these moving parts behave in the moment and how they're influenced by something that isn't the thing.
And right.
Is an independent action.
Right, and the usual suspects are the ones who create the most gravity and bend a defense are like the Currys, and he used the example of J.J. Redick.
Yeah.
And just as a quick Redick aside, look at this team, right? The Pelicans, Redick, Brandon Ingram, Jahlil Okafor,
Zope.
Zion Williamson, and
Lonzo Ball.
No, Frank Jackson.
Ooh.
5 guys from the one and done bus factory.
Woo! Oh, that's trouble for New Orleans. You hate to observe it.
Oh God, it is challenging to perceive.
You regret to spy it, man. That's trouble, dude.
5-man, one and done BF lineup.
I've had some weird concerns about Zion recently. I mean, big news this week. Like he signed his deal with Jordan Brand. I am not cynical about this. I think it's going to be awesome. I think he's going to put out a cool looking shoe. How do you mess up the letter Z? There's cool angles in it, and it's going to.
Zorro paved the way for this.
Zorro was the original.
Flaming, made by a sword. Keep it moving.
But I think the shoe's going to be great, and they want it to be like kind of the shoe everyone wears, not unlike the Kobe's or the Kyries or the MJ's.
Look, this is what Jordan Brand always struggles with, is that how do you differentiate Zion as a player from Jordan Brand? So that's the interesting part to me is I get it. They want to have huge name athletes like any shoe company, maybe because he's from the same like sort of South Atlantic area that he went to Duke. I mean, maybe they're counting on there being enough proximity between Zion and where he's from and where he went to school with Jordan Brand.
New Orleans is not a bad landing place for Jordan Brand.
Right. But also what's interesting is that maybe we're also viewing this from like a bit of a boomer standpoint and that we still
There's
remember
a little boomer in all of us.
We still remember Michael Jordan as an athlete.
Yeah.
And maybe at some point there will come a moment when the people who are purchasing Zion sneakers think of Jordan as a brand.
It's already happening.
Versus being
fully.
Like an actual player to compare him to that has a shadow cast long that looms over any sort of athlete who signs with that company.
I mean, how many people know Paul Newman was an actor? Probably a lot, but not as many as you think. Like, oh, he's that guy that sells those great products that are delicious.
The popcorn god.
Yo, his popcorn is the best, hands down.
Lemonade, solid.
Ranch dressing, what's up? But I've been having doubts about Zion as a player only. I have no doubts with his marketability. The shoe's going to be great. I can't wait. The colors in New Orleans are pretty fantastic. Purple and teal. Awesome. Gold. But his ceiling is obviously the greatest of all time. He could be Shaq with a motor. Like, that's his ceiling. It's awesome. He's one of the rare prospects. He also, I mean, there's always been like jokes that he's Randall with hops, right? But like,
according to Inez Cantor,
the
Turkish skeptic.
Yeah, but like the way we criticize Ben Simmons and in the same breath we give like Donovan Mitchell kind of a pass, but Jamal Murray a pass or Tatum a pass. I mean, there's critics of those guys too, but we're quick to point out their weaknesses. Zion has a few weaknesses, and prospects like Luka Doncic and Jaren Jackson Jr. didn't have these weaknesses.
What's interesting about Zion is that we were supposed to be able to see him and see how he looked against
I'm glad we didn't.
relative NBA competition.
Yeah.
And he played 8 minutes, bruised his knee, and shut it down for the rest of...
Smart.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is smart in terms of the injury risk,
Yeah.
but we didn't get the look that we wanted as fans.
And he was out of shape. It wasn't fair. He's going to get in shape. He'll be fine.
I mean, he wasn't bad. He played 8 minutes and scored like 9 points and dunked 3 times or something. You know, you saw glimpses of the player he could be. But to your point, seeing him play for Duke and then saying, wait, he now has to go against the best players in the world. It's very different. And it actually takes him showing up in that uniform for you to be like, oh, right, this is what we're gauging now. We're not saying, how does he play with a bunch of 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds who are going to go and become pharmacists? Now, like,
Why pharmacists? Why'd you choose that?
It's just a profession.
Lawyers?
Sure.
Not everyone can be a lawyer. What's the most common?
Pill peddlers.
Oh, man. All right.
But the guys who will not be professional basketball players, and then now you see him in that uniform, you're like, oh, right, you have to play against Kawhi. Like, that's different.
You have to play against Mitchell Robinson, who had him in fits for those 8 minutes, right? And
The 8 minutes in which he scored 9 points.
yeah, but did you see how he scored them? Like, he stripped Knox. He had to put
He
back.
humiliated Knox a couple of times.
But he like got blocked a bunch of times by Mitch. Like it was a reality, and I think he's going to be great. I'm all in on him. But shout out to players like LeBron James, who like I can't believe, man. I watched him play that high school game on ESPN. I think it was a long time ago, and he ended up being as good as all the pressure we put on him.
There was a viral clip of LeBron playing in high school that went around. I don't know if you saw that, but the conceit of it was something like, I don't know, you're just trying to get to like AP calculus and you got to go against LeBron, or it was that kind of thing, and it showed clips from like the first half of one of his high school games, and it was dunking threes, no look passes, all that stuff. And what was really cool about it was that you watch these clips of LeBron at 17, 18 years old, and the only takeaway was that's what it looks like when LeBron plays against high school guys.
Yeah.
It wasn't look at young-ass LeBron. It was look at LeBron playing against teens. And it was like how he would look now. He was so advanced in comparison even then. And now we know, obviously, he's bigger, stronger, faster, more skilled, all that.
He
But it
stayed
still
advanced.
looked like LeBron James just smashing out and like windmills and no looks. And like, oh, cool, we can see what LeBron would look like against 15-year-olds.
And this kind of carries through to the NBA because LeBron James looks different against the Knicks versus Kawhi Leonard. And we always, like, I think we did this in the playoffs when teams were playing good defenses, being like, what's wrong with them? They can't shoot. There's problems with their offense. I'm like, these are the best teams. Like, you're at the conference finals, like, they're good defenders. But it's just a problem. And it's different than playing, like, the Hornets 4 times.
Well, that brings us to a common source of debate on cookies and a frequent discussion around the old NBA of Ben Simmons' jump shot.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about B.J. McDonald. Sixers legend.
Oh, man. Poor Tej. But so Ben Simmons has been playing, pickup ball against NBA players, just as everyone does in the offseason.
Devin Booker.
And it's sort of become a bit of an off-season phenomenon that people leak these videos. And
Super fun.
It's fun, and we try to assume and speculate what players look like. For example, Melo is just the king of these things because he does have such a beautiful, aesthetically pure game and he can score from everywhere. And you'd watch Hoodie Mello playing against other NBA dudes, and you're
He's
like,
awesome.
oh, he's better than everybody. It's Mello. It's Hoodie Mello. Look, he's an icon. He just did an insane spin move. Then he pulled up for three. Then he posted someone up.
And you see ballers deferring to him on these videos.
And then now we're seeing Ben Simmons taking a bunch of jump shots and attempts that he did not take frequently this year. And
Totally leaked on purpose, like
right, and
from
people,
his camp.
were dissecting his jump shot, and you had people saying like, "Look, he's going to unveil the jumper next year," and then other people saying, "Oh, I don't see how it looks much different from what we've seen in the past." So, do you have any takeaways off the Zapruder Simmons footage?
A little bit, but more as like a vibe thing. It's sort of like people argue when he's not doing this against a team in the regular season, or until we see it in a real game, it's not true. And it's just a bunch of like YMCA guys, even though Devin Booker was clearly there. And it's weird how this has taken like a life of its own, where it almost becomes musical or like an audio meme. It's sort of like, well, I don't want a socialist for president. I'm like, no, that's not what they're talking about. It's like, socialist. I'm like, no, it's complicated. It's like, I said socialist. And that's kind of what people with Ben Simmons are doing, because it sounds smart to be like, oh, he can't shoot in a real game. He's shooting with the wrong hand, and he needs to create space on the court because some nerd told me spacing and threes was the whole thing. It's not. He's like a different player. We're categorizing him differently, incorrectly. He's a big who has like all the speed that makes him look like a point guard. He's just Jokic, but I'm sorry, Jokic is a point guard. My bad. He's Chris Webber with like speed.
The thing that's also weird about the reaction to this footage is that I swear to God, people did not watch Simmons play as a rookie because the Sixers were not supposed to be good. And then they ended up winning 52 games, and people watched him in the playoffs. People didn't watch Philly. They weren't on TV that much. He took something like 200 mid-range jumpers as a rookie.
Junk.
And he made a third of them. Yeah. That's not even horrible. It's just sort of like enough below average to make a below average shot not worth taking. So when people are like, wow, pull up, I'm like, no, we saw him do this. He took he took 200 of them. The idea that he just has never taken them, like there's nothing real about that. He decided not to take them last season, and Philly was a much more popular team. They were on TV. People saw him not taking them and just got in their feelings. It was like he tried them.
Why is it offensive?
It's because we actually said this last week. It's like people see him turning down shots that they would take.
Right.
An NBA 3, average person can't make that shot.
It's far.
It's really far. The average person can't dunk, but an uncontested shot from 13 feet away, oh yeah, all day, you take that.
Right.
It's like, and every sense of moral outrage about Simmons is just based on feelings. It's the bitterness and the scorn. It ties into his personality and how he looks and who he dates and his money and the fact that he's very sort of cold and seems haughty. There's like a whole bunch of shit that ties into it. But I think fundamentally it's that he doesn't take shots that Joe Schmo himself would take.
I'm for sure going to go into the sin bin after this, but this is the debate that's been happening in baseball where all players are doing is like home runs or walks or strikeouts. It's like true outcomes. And we were talking about that earlier. It's just like, what's gravity when there's only one true outcome? I shoot the ball, or I miss the shot, or I make the shot, or I get to the foul line. And a lot of people are mad that players aren't hitting for average anymore because they're just like, they're swinging for the fences. And the game has changed. It's less like small ball and just home runs, or you just sit down on the bench. And that's kind of the smarter way to play because a zillion years after Moneyball and Bill James, they're just like, oh, right, we just have to concentrate on true outcomes. And Simmons is one of those future players that are doing that thing. It's just like, oh, these are the shots that defenses don't want me to take. Defenses want me to shoot long range. Defenses don't want me to dunk to get to the line. He needs to work on his foul shooting, but him getting to the line is really valuable, and him causing all that commotion under the rim is how everything works for Philly.
And there was a discussion about Simmons' effectiveness, and it always goes down the exact same tiresome spiral because no one can look at the numbers that Simmons puts up and his effect on the offense aside Embiid and say, this is bad because the Sixers had a ridiculously good offense. They always have. They've won a lot of games. But everyone says, well, it's in the playoffs.
It's an optic smorgasbord.
It's late in playoffs. It's late in playoffs against elite defensive teams, which goes back to what you said. Who doesn't fucking struggle late in playoff games against elite defenders? Like, that's the teams that win championships. Oh, can't believe this player wasn't as good against the best on the planet. And the only thing, without resurrecting that whole debate, no one talks about how the Sixers were eliminated 2 years in a row because Joel Embiid had trouble scoring one-on-one against Al Horford and then couldn't score against Marc Gasol. And people blame it on someone else. No one talks about Tobias Harris being unable to shoot. It's like people just want to focus on one dude. And it's not that the public at large is annoyed. That's cool. It's that Sixers fans are so weirdly in their feelings. Like, they've lost their minds. And it's really, you hate to see it.
That happens to some athletes, right? Like, there's some athletes that garner, not to beat a dead horse, but like gravity from fans. It's like, we just care. Like, when we found out, when the Knicks Nation found out, like, oh, we can make fun of the owner because there's so much player turnover, it's Dolan. I sound smart when I say, like, fire Dolan, sell the team Dolan. We figured out a way to direct our ire. And I think Sixers fans, I love them, but, like, they're passionate, and Ben Simmons is the target. And that's why, like, Lillard is happy in Portland, like, because he would get trashed in New York or Philly. Like, LA, they don't. LA fans just love their team. But, like,
I don't know. I think there are certain guys who are magnets for criticism, whether it's their attitude, the idea that they don't want to be there. There was
Derek Coleman. We just mentioned Derek Coleman earlier, but he was one of those guys that people just didn't like.
But there's always this sense of public scrutiny when things aren't going wrong, that someone needs to be the fall guy. And we saw it with the Knicks with D'Antoni. We all know D'Antoni is one of the best coaches of all time. That's not even debatable.
He invented
They
so
had
much
built
stuff.
a Knicks team that was a 6 seed, full of young guys. Most of them didn't turn out to be superstars or anything, but they're still in the league. The Wilson Chandlers and the Gallos, and even Raymond Felton was playing last year. Mozgov, the king. He was on Orlando, whatever. But the point was, they got rid of all those guys that were a 6 seed to bring in Melo, and then everyone just turned on D'Antoni because they don't play defense.
Yeah.
D'Antoni doesn't coach defense. It's
right, because it fits a narrative.
Because people don't understand pace. That was the goofiest thing about it all, was that the Knicks had an elite defense under D'Antoni. But the perception was that, like,
coach.
He's totally fine. They just run a lot, and people would look and be like, they gave up 110 points.
Yeah.
Like, no, their offense actually wasn't good.
Yeah.
The Knicks' defense was better under D'Antoni than Woodson.
Yeah. I always say, like, the best defense is a good offense.
The year D'Antoni was fired, I believe they had the 5th defensive rating in the NBA, while every Knicks fan was just weeping hot, salty tears about D'Antoni not coaching defense. And every boomer is like, oh, yeah, when he coached me, he told us not to foul guys when they're going in for an uncontested layup. How dumb is that? And you're like, no, you're the idiot.
Yeah, I'm not even mad at that kind of fandom. It's kind of we saw that kind of with John Wick, right? Like, I love Keanu Reeves. I love John Wick 1. John Wick 2 was even better. I'm like, did you see 3? I'm like, oh, there's a 3? I'm like, oh, right, we're just doing a thing. Or it's just like, Keanu Reeves, the best. And I'm like, is he? Okay, that's what we're doing now, And I think with sports fandom, I don't blame somebody for not looking at Basketball Reference. It's just, like, ridiculous, right? That we go there and we're just like, actually, D'Antoni is, like, a pretty solid defensive coach. Like, I don't ask that from a discussion at a coffee shop or a bar.
Rest in peace to TNT Players Only.
Oh,
I'm going to miss it. It was the broadcast, I want to say it was once a week, where
Isaiah Thomas, Chris Webber,
Kevin McHale,
Dennis Scott.
it was all former NBA players, and they were all the anchors, all the commentators at the games, all the cameramen, all the ones holding up the script, the little cards that say applaud. Just
A fun idea.
oh look, it's George Murasan holding up a card, but
Oh, my giant.
but it was supposed to feature the personalities and the sort of the autonomy of the former NBA athlete,
And their voice, their unique voice.
and it was largely disliked to the extent that its cancellation was met with relative jubilation yesterday.
It made me sad a little bit, and I hated it in real time. I was just like, I cannot watch this anymore. They talk weird. They need to go to like announcing school. Like they're not ready for this. And as soon as it was canceled, I was like, oh, that was a good hate watch. You know, like I kind of enjoyed that.
I totally feel the same way. It reminded me of the old Magic Johnson show.
Yeah, yeah.
Where we watched it every night because he was so bad at being a host, and
Sure.
you're just like, oh, we got to see what Magic does out there.
Yeah. Sort of like with Magic's.
Remember when Magic had Howard Stern on? Because Howard
remember
Stern
that.
would just trash him day in and day out, and then he brought him on the show because the ratings were bombing. He's like, all right, we got to bring your biggest critic onto the show. And it was like, Howard Stern versus Magic on the Magic Johnson Hour?
Yes, the Magic Hour.
The Magic Hour.
And like, that's a
Good name.
great name. Everything works on paper, but he's just not good at that thing. He's the best at being a power forward in the NBA.
Incredible power forward.
But Magic is a great example of that because I felt this way about him every turn of his career after basketball. It's just like, oh, I really enjoyed his Twitter. Now he is part of the Lakers, so he can't tweet. That's a shame. I'm like, oh, I really enjoyed him as a knucklehead, like front office guy. He's quit. Oh, that's a shame. I'm like, I just love in the moment. It's like fun to make fun of, and then as soon as it's gone, you're like, "Thank you for like giving us all this content, buddy. Like that's really awesome."
No, it's a gift.
Yeah, he's
You
good
don't
at it.
have to be good at something to be interesting or enjoyable. You know, Magic doesn't seem like he's particularly good at anything except being a power forward. And he was
Excellent.
fantastic at that. But he's also great at being Magic Johnson,
Yeah.
former
Oh, there's a
power
talent there.
forward. And that he's great at doing that. He's not great at being a talk show host or a GM or a tweeter, but he's still Magic Johnson, and he's awesome at being Magic.
I mean, if he joined the ESPN crew again, I'd be really happy. Like that's just gonna be fun. Like get on Twitter, everyone get those jokes ready. I actually started an account maybe like 10 years ago of just quoting Magic Johnson, just like verbatim as he talks, just like writing down everything he said. And then he went to the front office and it stopped.
With the TNT show, Players Only, how could it have been better? Because my critique of it was generally, it was along the lines of what you were saying. These guys weren't like good in a general standpoint. But my gripe was always that they chose guys who seemed to have the same outlook, and that there was a homogenization of what the former players would say and think and how they would express themselves about the game, and they were all kind of the same, and it was always this sort of curmudgeon griping about the modern game, saying they were tougher in the past, and they all did it. And now we see guys like Kendrick Perkins, kind of
Ryan
or
Hollins.
Ryan Hollins showing up, and to me it seems like a variation on that same theme.
I agree. And the players that participated in Players Only, like they were set up for failure. I mean,
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying.
it wasn't their fault because of course they feel this way. They were so successful. A lot of them won championships, and their value in their post NBA lives has been like, how did you win that championship? And they always like reside in toughness, wanting it more. And I get it. That's the only way to explain something unexplainable. They can't be like, dude, BJ Armstrong was like super good. You know, like they can't really talk about that and have that flow as a conversation.
But the thing is, that's why I wonder, because maybe they can, but it's
True.
so easy to fall into those
But they're not
cliches,
asked to.
and they're also being rewarded for stepping into those cliches. Be the former athlete who complains about flagrant fouls. Be the one who says that this guy needs to, want it more. All these
Flopping.
Exactly. Like Van Gundy and Mark Jackson kind of set out this template. And if you want to get into the league as a former player, you're expected to form those opinions, and that's your role. And how antagonistic can you be? Can you be Ryan Hollins, who
He's great.
But that just seems to be his role. He's like, I'm just going to be like the boomer mentality, and even more dickish and more sort of.
He's self-aware, though. I really like him.
He totally could be.
He's funny.
But in that way, like he's like, I'm going to take that and be even more so.
Yeah.
Where are the former guys who can actually cite numbers and
Not that me and you want that, and I know the audience does it, but who are the guys along those lines that can like talk with nuance?
like, why didn't someone go and say, we need Shane Battier and we'll pay him whatever it takes because we know that he represents a different facet of the athlete experience?
There's no incentive for Shane Battier, right? Like, doesn't he work for a team currently? But
I think he does.
It's like Tim Duncan probably can talk better than most of these guys on Players Only, but he wanted a coaching job. Like there's cerebral guys out there in the league, but why would you want to call games? You know, like
And I'm not even saying that this group is not cerebral at all. I'm saying they are being set up to fail because they're rewarded for expressing.
their incentive is off. Totally.
Yeah. And that's what's weird to me is that no one just says, all right, so here's the thing. They're given these numbers, but there's no incentive for them to say, well, I hear what you're saying about there not being enough basketballs and, someone needs to be the alpha male who's going to get the ball late in the game, but they have the third-ranked offense.
Yeah.
So what's the problem?
I mean,
their defense is terrible, and no one does that.
Players like Ricky Williams, No Simbin are rare that can look back on their amazing career and be like, oh, I was antiquated or I made a mistake here or maybe things have changed. And like to see it with that lens, I think is really rare. And people don't like that. I don't think in mass, like the viewership for Players Only wants to be like, oh, this is kind of melancholy. Like Isaiah Thomas looks back at the Bad Boys being like, we didn't play the right way.
Wait
like
a
you don't
minute.
want to hear that.
Bill Laimbeer was the best player on our team. It wasn't because he was a flagrant fouler, is because he was highly efficient, a great passer, and an elite defender. That Bill Laimbeer was the best player on the championship team, and Isaiah Thomas got all the credit because of dribble bias and
100.
because he was a college superstar.
100%. And Isaiah Thomas was also good, but Dennis
Awesome,
Rodman
Hall of
too.
Famer. But like Bill Laimbeer was the best player on that championship team, and Dennis Rodman was second best.
Rodman was insane. It was wild. People underrate him so much because he became kind of larger than his basketball career. But if you go back and look at his numbers in his prime, it's just like, this guy's awesome.
Right. I do not think that there is a lack of former players who can speak with nuance and look at numbers and say, here's what's happening here. I just don't think they're either being targeted for this or they're interested in doing it. And that's why Players Only was always going to be doomed unless you just said, yeah, it's going to be basically dudes just chirping about how the guys today are pussies.
Yeah. The Kevin Garnett segment that they were trying to do, I forgot, it was like Area 31. What was his number? 31, right?
Yeah, something like that.
It had potential, and it was set up to fail as well because they're like, we want you to just talk to players like your friends, that you guys are just hanging out, talk about the game in terms of like a friendship instead of like analysts. So he would have like Rasheed Wallace sit down and they would just like laugh, and it was infectious. And there was part of it that was really fun because I'm like, they are relaxed, like they are friends. And Rasheed Wallace is just like the best dude. Like, get him on that show. Like if we can pick the guys, like Rasheed Wallace would be my number one pick to be on Players Only. But that kind of worked too. And what we're seeing is kind of like a dying out of this medium, right? Of like analysts and entertainment as the game is going on. Like the color in announcing in sports is kind of changing.
Yeah, I don't think we need a plethora of Nate Duncan hyper-metric-y analysts to, flood all these networks. I just think you could have characters and get that personality that you want from former players and just temper it with some people who can talk about like the facts versus feelings.
Yeah, and this is like a weird thought, but like Monday Night Football tried comedians for color, which kind of worked and kind of didn't.
They're building the wall of Jericho out there. I haven't seen this many. Oh God, Dennis Miller was so unbearable.
So unbearable, but they picked the wrong one, right? Because
who knew he would become a total psycho also?
He's an odd dude. That generation of SNL guys, like, what a strange path.
Is it just cocaine?
I don't know. Hubris, cocaine, kind of not that funny in real time. Like, I liked him, but it was that Andre Agassi, G. Smith era where just like, oh, anyone with long hair is like cool as shit, And I'm like,
Dan Cortez, the realist. Mimbo season.
Yeah. Did you see Agassi has that long hair? What a rebel. That was his whole thing. Like, he sold rebel cameras. And it turns out like he was just like a sad drug addict, like
dress like Nicolas Cage in Raising Arizona and go off.
But that didn't work either. Like, and you see NBA on TNT kind of like they're not growing into anything new. I think they need like a dynamic change a little bit, but they're still the best. And as soon as they take Shaq off of it, I'm gonna be like, I miss Shaq.
Yeah, it did feel. Players only did not feel up to date. I think that was the main issue with it because it was older guys and it looked like a time capsule of something in general that was not 2019. It looked like it was 1997.
Yeah, it was just a bit scoldy. Like, it just felt like the whole thing, they were trying to scold someone the whole time. It's just like, not like us. We wouldn't do that, but everyone else. And it just didn't work. They didn't get the right personnel. I think it comes down to personnel because the concept is good. I think you roll with that if you're TNT. They just shouldn't hire. Why does Isaiah Thomas get so many chances at everything? Is he the nicest, most awesome dude?
Definitely not.
Yeah, probably not.
From what we know of his role with the Knicks and on other teams, he is definitely not the nicest dude.
Yeah.
It is weird, though, that he is, despite things like the sexual harassment, I don't even want to say what it was because I don't know. I don't want to be incorrect, whether it was a settlement, but he has maintained, and also being a terrible GM for the Knicks, he has maintained this thing of like Isaiah.
And terrible analysis
But
constantly.
yet he will be around forever. He's got a good smile, and he was a college star, and he's a boomer icon. It is weird, though. Like, Isaiah, fucking mafioso, man, just untouchable. Like, he'll keep trotting out there doing Isaiah stuff forever.
I think it's underrated how like accommodating he is in the moment. Like you said, big smile. Like Dolan, I remember was like, 5 minutes and we were best friends.
I think people love him.
Yeah, definitely. And like that goes back to the thing I'm constantly thinking about. You got to be two of three things, right? Like good at what you do, on time, or likable. And he's probably on time and likable, and that's enough.
I believe it's true. He might be someone that has the gift of others wanting to be around them. I know people like that who have been incredibly successful because they have the gift of other people want them in the room.
Which is so rare. Like I can't
really
even think
rare.
about that. Yeah. Like I wish to be that kind of person. Like that would be amazing to have everyone like you,
And maybe Isaiah has that, and it's hard to pick up on when you're not there. And you're like, what is it about this dude?
Yeah.
But everyone who meets him is like, Isaiah's here.
Yeah.
Oh, it just got fun.
And it's
things are cool now.
I'm just waiting for that Andrew Wiggins moment where like the Timberwolves are like, oh, we got new leadership. Wiggins is the problem. As soon as we get rid of this contract, everything will be better. It's sort of like I'm waiting for basketball at home being like, oh, we shouldn't give Isaiah this platform because he doesn't speak to anyone in particular. We should like hire him and have him be around, but like we can't put him in front of the camera because we're not getting the response. But he's going to get another gig somewhere. Like the prime, like Bill Simmons is the god. Like respect to him. My favorite era of NBA coverage was when he was on ESPN and him and Magic. That was amazing when they drafted Anthony Bennett, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Simmons just went off in real time. I'm like, this is what I want. This is the future. and it turns out they're pulling away from that kind of vibe.
Other teams that want to be changed.
Nice.
Let me do that again. Let's see. The on-air teams are not the only ones with some unhappiness and a need for change. Not quite there yet.
That's okay. It's okay.
All right. Well, so following the flurry of free agent signings that happened right at the exact moment when free agency started, teams are now concerned about tampering. Now, there was a Zach Lowe article where he described how at these off-season meetings between members of the governors, aka the owners, the governorship, there is a lot of unhappiness.
Steve Kerr came out with that statement
about tampering in general, that deals are being made and there's contact between teams and agents and players that shouldn't be happening. And one solution was Daryl Morrii, and a few other teams agreed with him that they should move free agency up before the draft so that you could have more trades and there wouldn't be this period of time of pretend inactivity. And then you also have other teams suggesting there should be heavy penalties laid upon franchises, and we'll go through phones and we'll go through emails and we'll investigate and find out who is talking to who, or cracking down on players trying to recruit other players. And I just cut you off, but your thing about Kerr was that he says he doesn't basically like that Kawhi went to the Clippers. Was that his gripe? What was his? Oh no, it was Anthony Davis.
It was Anthony Davis, and he just basically said what you said. He didn't appreciate that these players were kind of messing with the structure of the NBA, and he has to say that he's a competitor, so he's just kind of leaving bait out there. He's really smart, and I doubt if you sit him down in private, he actually believes that. But in order to have a rule, you have to be able to enforce it. So I don't even know what this discussion is, because we observe something happening that's out of the NBA's control. But if you can't enforce it, you just have to let it be and have it control itself, right? Or police itself.
It seems to me that the idea of tampering is just a euphemism for player movement.
Yeah.
They're ranting and raving about tampering. What? Who cares?
Yeah.
A team negotiated with a free agent a week earlier than they would have. It doesn't matter.
This is like a half-hearted apology, right? Because I think everyone is excited that the NBA is still on, in people's minds during the offseason. And we talked about this during free agency, being this league, right? We're still talking about player movement, and the league, the championship has been decided for months already. And even the champion is going to move, and we're just oh my God, this is breaking news. This is really engaging stuff as a fan. And the half-hearted apology has to be oh no, this is not ethical. We have to make this as fair as possible. But they don't mean it.
And they don't mean it because they have multiple enemies here. If you're a franchise, you're well, I want the ability to sign players from other teams, but I don't want my guys being taken.
Yeah.
So I'm against player mobility because I don't think it'll benefit me. If you're the Milwaukee Bucks, who got mentioned several times in that article, you're all right, we've got the next sort of sitting duck. We've got Giannis, and if we can't win a championship with him, and maybe even if we do, he could get coaxed to join a superstar in a different market. And our franchise relies on making sure that doesn't happen. So we're sitting there staring at you, Knicks, Clippers, Lakers, Miami Heat, and being don't fucking take my guy. That's our dude, and we need to set up a way that you can't go talking to my guy, because I just need the idea that there's something to prevent my guy from leaving.
It's like lobbying for a call in real time, being that wasn't a foul, that wasn't a foul. And a lot of announcers would just be oh, he's lobbying for the next call. And then lo and behold, he gets a call.
Because no one thinks that tampering is really going to make your guy leave.
No.
Everyone just thinks we got to figure out a way to keep him, and we don't want him to have the option to leave. So what they're really going to try to do is get to a franchise tag or something.
Yeah, which would be annoying, and I don't think Silver is the disaster that is the franchise tag in the NFL. I don't think Silver's going to do that because it's awful. But I also think the player movement is somewhat predictive. And, right, the Bucks declaring foul is kind of a chess move in the future. Like they have to shoot their shot. It's a troll move because there's no downside to saying that because you just seem ethical. But they're trying to prevent their player predictively for probably leaving to a bigger market. If Giannis moves to the teams you mentioned, no one would be shocked. If he moved to New Orleans, you'd be like, what?
And if you're the Clippers or the Lakers, you have to sit there and nod and pretend to be sympathetic.
Yeah. This is part of this. I know you don't believe in simulation, but this is just part of this product. There has to be pushback, and there has to be
this product.
this product. But there has to be a cop being like, yeah, I'm on the beat. It's like, oh, someone just stole my wallet. I'm like, what am I going to do about it?
That's what it is. And everything is a product of being annoyed by player freedom and mobility and autonomy and their opportunity to join unions outside of franchises. It was all good when Boston was able to trade for, Ray Allen and Garnett.
A trade that they lost versus the Nets.
Oh, yes, exactly. But when Boston got their big three, no one was mad other than the fact that
before
McHale
the
had
failed trade.
clearly done a solid to his old franchise. They traded it for Ray Allen for Jeff Green or some shit.
Yeah.
And Al Jefferson.
Survivor.
But whatever. That was all good. When LeBron and Bosh and Wade decided to play together, that was the beginning of the end. It was players determining this. But the irony is that it was the owners who created a situation where guys had shorter contracts. It wasn't like players wanted shorter contracts. That was the owners.
Yeah. Well, I remember when the players union negotiated all the contract structures, and Chris Paul, who wanted to play in LA, was like, oh, I'll just take less money. I'm like, no, if you take less money, this whole thing will crumble. And we're kind of seeing that now, where it's just like, oh, you guys have circumvented this whole thing by manipulating money outside of the league, whether that be Space Jam 7 more jams, or a Nike contract. You guys are underpaid by the league and profitable in ways that we haven't accounted for, and there's no way for us to police. So the correction I'm talking about is all these players are signing 2-year deals, and that's where I think Brooklyn is should be upset now because they signed these two guys, Kyrie and KD, to long-term deals over 2 years. And
Brooklyn wants that though. You don't want someone on a 2-year deal. That the Clippers got fucked unbelievably by having Kawhi come and take 2 instead of 4.
I agree, but what I'm getting at is those two people that they got, I think there's a small chance they might regret that in 2 years, whether that be injury or both people.
I see that, but
then the pool is wide open in 2 years again. Everyone's available again, and maybe by that time we'll see 4-year deals again. But everyone's jockeying for those 2 years, and the Nets are kind of holding the bag.
Well, it comes down to a few years back. If you signed a free agent, remember Juwan Howard was a great example of one.
Max dude.
But they signed him to something like a 10-year deal or an 8-year deal.
Garnett had one of those, 11 or something.
Right. Glenn Robinson as a rookie signed a 10-year deal. And there was no limitation. You could sign guys for as long as you wanted. And then after a while, it seems wait, we're going to get screwed because we don't want to give a guy a contract that long because then we can't trade him if he ends up not being the player that we thought he was going to be. And now it's the other way around where the players see the benefits of saying, no. I'm going to get a 2-year deal and I'm going to be a free agent again. And then I can go play with my friends or I can get more money. And it blew up in the owner's face.
Yeah, and it kind of undermines this principle that you have to be loyal to a team and the team has to have a narrative and Reggie Miller on the Pacers or Kobe Bryant on the Lakers, they take form around these superstars, and then those superstars create these stories that we remember. Now all of it's kind of a free-for-all. And Kawhi Leonard recently, during the press conference, much to maybe some people's anger in Toronto, was they threw me an amazing parade. That was the best parade ever. And it was just oh my, but we dated for so long. Wait, yeah, okay, but it meant really a lot to us. Do you not feel the same way? Was this did you dump me? Did, all these feelings came out. And
yeah, people were annoyed that Kawhi hadn't thanked specific people or members of the organization. It's
Have we not learned anything about Kawhi? Like, Kawhi acts one way all the time. He's awesome.
Kawhi is a villain who cares about money.
Yeah, he's a super villain, man.
Like, oh, the villain didn't thank me. The villain doesn't thank you.
Yeah. The villain doesn't miss me and care about
The villain
me.
does what he wants.
Yeah.
But the Kawhi thing is interesting because him and Durant are a new archetype. And as usual, it was kind of spurred by LeBron. LeBron sort of sets these trends and faces the inevitable blowback from the public most of the time. Going to, Miami was a huge move in terms of what it meant for player mobility. And he took
Massively influential move. The decision.
He absorbed all those arrows that Durant.
But now it's an inverse bell curve. It's coming back in his favor.
Right, but LeBron going to LA was not even viewed in a way of rage because he went and won a championship, and that made it way easier for Kawhi to leave.
Yeah.
No one's mad at Kawhi for leaving.
No.
If LeBron hadn't already gone to the Lakers after winning a championship, maybe people would feel differently. Maybe not. I don't know.
If Simmons hadn't beaten Kawhi in the playoffs, people would be so mad at him.
But, the Sixers got that chip.
Yeah, he got that chip, and now Kawhi limps to the Clippers as
Licking
someone,
his wounds.
Yeah, someone who was defeated by the superior team.
But it's weird because I always thought there was going to be a role for a new archetype of mercenary players. And it was never going to be LeBron because LeBron cares too much.
Yeah, he cares too much.
And I thought it might be Durant, and it still could be, but the injury messed him up.
I hate that injury so much.
But it's Kawhi.
Yeah,
Kawhi is
it.
the new archetype, and people aren't necessarily seeing it because he's not outspoken. Right. He's not someone who is publicly voicing the idea that this is a moment, that it's more than an athlete, that it's about athletes versus management. There's no political context to anything he's doing because he's a supervillain. But he is a new archetype, the player who just goes where he wants, he wins, and he moves along. There's no loyalty to the Spurs, no loyalty to Toronto. He has no loyalty whatsoever to the Clippers.
Lakers, to the fraternity of the NBA, he has no loyalty.
No loyalty to any franchise, he just takes franchises apart. It's brilliant, but we didn't see it coming.
And he checks so many boxes for boomers, right? Because he is quiet. He's successful. He's not small or big. So you can't really talk about someone like being overpowered, or you can't talk about someone just taking advantage of their God-given size.
Shoots a lot of mid-range.
Shoots a ton of mid-range. Is a lunch pail dude,
Plays defense.
Yeah, and the stories about him are just he drives a beat-up car and cares about Wingstop. It all just formed in his favor. But when you step back after all those kind of surface things, he's the most treacherous guy in sports.
But I was waiting for this archetype to arrive.
I thought it was going to be LeBron, but he does care too much.
I thought it was going to be Durant. I thought he would hang out and win a couple of years in
a one-year contract, just keep on winning.
In Golden State, and I thought he was going to leave before this season. And that, to me, would have been okay, he did it. He went and got his rings, and now he's just going to be this dude who rolls around joining up with other good teams and other good players and winning championships, and it's going to change the way we view basketball. Conversely, though, with Kawhi, it's so under the radar that it might not actually lead in a sea change. He's doing it. He's that archetype, but people aren't viewing him in that way, or because that player will be criticized and be divisive, and Kawhi is not.
I agree. I think we can definitely call this era of player empowerment a thing, but it's going to end. And I think it's going to end with this personnel because they're that good, and this is what happened. This is a phenomenon that's going to have an equal and opposite reaction. And we'll see what the Jaren Jackson Jr.'s or the Trae Youngs or the Lukas will do, but they seem like they care too much too.
And that's what this tampering meeting was about. It was about discontent with this era. So what happens? Can it be put back in a box?
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
they are going to try to. There is no doubt that there'll be a lockout. there'll be some sort of renegotiation of the CBA, and the owners will try to end this era. But can it be done?
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to be done because of an act or a balance or a check to that balance. But like, it's going to get done just because human nature just like wants to like fuck with the thing that came before it. And would you be surprised if Jaren Jackson Jr. ended up becoming an all-star, being like, I love Memphis. They've been loyal to me. I'm going to stay for 5 years. And be like, all right.
Oh, there's still going to be those guys. There'll be Lillards. But we've reached a critical mass in terms of players not caring about the franchise that they're at, along with something like Clutch being here with all these figures. And the league is going to go and try to tinker with certain ways.
I mean, we're already talking about Zion's free agency, which is wild.
The NBA, in the same way that they were irked about Hinkie, is mad about this.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if it's possible.
Fake mad.
No, they're really mad about this.
I don't know. You're right in the way that the owners are the NBA. Silver is not the NBA.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They're not
certain owners are mad about this.
Right. Yeah, if you're the
Dolan is psyched.
I mean, there's probably 10 owners that are like, this helps us.
Yeah.
And then the rest of them are like, 10 are like, I'm not sure. And then 10 are like, this fucking sucks.
The 10 that like it are probably the big markets, right?
Yeah. Or ones that are run by, smart GMs.
But isn't this what happens in any in any vacuum? Like if you have any set of people participating in this kind of thing, it's going to break down to like a third, right?
It's the bell curve of NBA governorship. Well, I hope Jordan gets some suntan lotion on that schnoz of his.
Prove to me that those aren't hot dogs. He's like a block away, just like chilling with the hards.
He's got a bucket of hards and 2 hot dogs dangling over a dog dish. Cookies.